the relationship between big houses and grower producers, because this is a sort of there's a tension between the two in a way, in a one way, and then there's not in another way. So, can you talk a
Mm,
little bit about that relationship, how you see it?
mm. Well, look, it's a relationship. There's a very long history, obviously, between grower producers and negotiants, or more specifically the Grand Marques. And it's changed a lot in particular over the last 5 to 10 years. I think when we think back to the early days of people like Anselm Salos, in particular, who was a very vocal critic of the conventional practices of the region in the early days, he certainly tempered this criticism quite a lot today. He was a very controversial figure in the early days, and the ideas he was espousing were very controversial.
Hmm.
Because Champagne is a very successful region from a commercial perspective, and so there's a lot of vested interest both on the side of the growers and on the side of the negotiants, the people
Sure.
who buy their fruit, right? And so if you rock the boat, that's likely to be controversial and potentially cause you some problems. And certainly Salos bore the brunt of a lot of that controversy, but he wasn't the only one. There was a lot of very heated exchanges that went on within the CIVC that I've heard about between, discussions between these sort of grape growers who were moving or trying to encourage their region to move in a particular direction, and those who wanted to maintain the status quo. But what's happened, I think, um, over time is as they become more of these grower producers become more and more successful, and they've received more and more good press within France and outside of France. People, I think the more sensible people, and a lot of the Grand Marques certainly have, and a lot of the negotiants in general, have started to see that these growers, are bringing a certain number of benefits to the region. They bring a lot of positive press.
Hmm.
They're certainly giving an example of a different way of approaching vineyard work and cellar work. And so they're complexing the region, if you like. And I think, in a very meaningful way, they're bringing a type of drinker back to the region, or making a type of drinker, and I'm talking about what we could call a fine wine drinker, or a serious wine drinker. They're making those kind of people think more seriously about champagne. I think a lot of wine collectors tend to view champagne as a meal with, or something that you use for celebrations, but
Sure.
they don't tend to class the same category as the best white burgundies, for example. But I think now that there's a very real argument. There's wines you can put on the table from these growers that really stack up to the best white wines on the planet, and that's got to have a significant value for the region. And they have the same level of interest because they come from a specific place, rather than being wines that appear to be more made than grown. So it's introduced a much richer culture, and a culture that fine wine people can recognise. And it's brought a certain authenticity to the region, but nonetheless, there is still, by changing practice, and we're talking about producers here who work with far lower yields, who tend to work organically or biodynamically, in the absence of chemicals, which is still very unusual in Champagne, and also work differently in the cellar. So by doing that, and many other things that aspire to higher quality, by doing that, they are naturally critiquing the conventional practices of the region, which obviously in turn puts heat on those who follow those conventional practices, which is the majority of the region, and in particular the majority of the negociants. So there is still a tension, But it's a tension that I think is far less prominent and certainly far less aggressive than it was in the early days.
So in a way, as it evolves in the region, you could say that there are mutual benefits. It's almost a new page in some respects.
Mm. I think as I say in the book, every great wine region needs its great growers. It needs its great artisans, and now Champagne at last has some. And I think also the questions that are naturally raised, not necessarily directly, but through the practices and the success of these great artisans, is helping the region articulate how it can improve as a whole. What kind of things do they need to do better? And I think these great growers give a very clear picture of what the region can aspire to. Not everyone can be a great artisan. Of course, Champagne needs its brands. It needs its mass market products as well. That's what the region was built on. That's what the success of the region was built on. But there's some middle ground that can be found. Let's put it that way. And I think we're starting to now at last see a kind of movement in both vineyard practices and in the general approach to wine growing and winemaking that suggests at some point, a lot of people say it's happening too slowly, but at some point, we will get to that middle ground I'm alluding to.